Sometimes God is silent in our life, and there are seasons when God chooses to remain silent, and when He does speak, it's His perfect time. So, in Isaiah 45, verse 15, we're told, "Truly you are a God who hides yourself." And Job lamented during his long trial of months in Job 23, verse 8 to 10, that God hides Himself on every side. But He knows the way that I take, and when He has tried me, I shall come forth as gold. So many times God gives very few details in times of darkness in our life. So when we're in a trial, God does not do a lot of explaining, I have learned. But this allows faith to develop, and hope, and trust, and many other things. And some of these things would not develop if God explained everything beforehand. So, the God who delivered me in past trials will deliver me in this one. And so I know that God is faithful. He is worthy to be trusted. The Apostle Paul said, "Experience works hope," or expectation. In Romans 5, verse 3 and 4, it states this: "We glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation works patience. Patience, experience, and experience, hope," or expectation. Many things would not develop in our spiritual life if God explained everything during the time of our trial or darkness. God did never say to Job, "This trial is going to be over in 1 year, and you will receive double for everything you've lost." No. Faith and many other qualities would not develop if God explained everything and the outcome during our trial. I have found that great light is the result of experiencing great darkness first. Someone was given a vision of 3 different women. The first woman in this vision, the Lord praised and complimented and encouraged and gave a lot of attention to. Well, the second woman was not nearly as given as much attention as the first. But then the third woman, the Lord walked right past her, didn't speak to her or even look at her. Well, the person having this vision interpreted it the very opposite of what God was trying to say. It was assumed that the first lady was very spiritual and God lavished her and was very pleased with her. The second lady was not nearly as spiritual and was not as blessed. The third lady God was greatly displeased with. This is the interpretation, but it was exactly the opposite. God then explained the true meaning of the vision. The first lady was so unstable and weak and immature that she needed a lot of attention. The second lady was more mature and didn't need quite as much attention. But that third lady was very spiritual, and God could trust her even in dark trials. That was the real meaning of this vision. I have found that people with great light have first experienced great darkness. Consider Job, for example. Some of the greatest spiritual treasures we received are during dark times. God is silently writing his laws deeply upon our hearts. God is quietly depositing his treasure and riches in us. God is doing a special work in the deepest parts of our heart. Yes, so during dark times, God is often quite silent. So we will seek him and trust him, and faith will develop. Remember this, if God explained everything and gave all the details, faith would not develop, and many other divine qualities would not develop. Let's consider the life of Joseph in Genesis chapter 37. Verse 5 through 9, God gave Joseph several dreams. He was only 17 years old. In this dream, Joseph was made ruler over his older brothers. Only 17 years old at the time of the vision. The dream, however, would not be fulfilled for later in life, at least 22 years or more. God did not explain to Joseph when the dream would be fulfilled. It would be fulfilled years later. And it would be fulfilled in another country, in Egypt. And God never explained how the dream would be fulfilled. All the things he needed to pass through before this dream would be fulfilled. God never told him, your brethren will betray you. You'll be sold as a slave into Egypt. You'll be betrayed there and put in prison for a number of years. So, in Psalm 105, verse 17 to 19, it further explains why God allowed this silence and so forth. But anyway, he sent a man before them, even Joseph, who was sold for a servant, whose feet they hurt with fetters. He was laid in iron. The original Hebrews means iron was being put into him, literally. Until the time that his word came, the word of the Lord was refining him. Psalm 105, verse 17 to 19. God was putting iron in Joseph's soul to become a world deliverer. Joseph was to have answers when there was a future world famine. God never explained all the processes he needed to go through first. And God is often silent and doesn't explain or give many details in our dark times. But he's doing something special, and he will speak in his time. Another example of this is Jacob, Joseph's father. Now, Joseph was a very special son of Jacob, and suddenly Joseph disappeared. Where is he? Well, his older brothers betrayed him and sold him. But Jacob didn't know where his son was, and that his older brothers had betrayed him. And anyway, this brought great anguish to Jacob. Where is my special son, Joseph? And it brought about great brokenness and sadness to Father Jacob. God did not choose to show him that Joseph was safe in another country, in Egypt. And God uses his knowledge sparingly sometimes, but very wisely. God knows when it is very best to speak and when to remain silent. Slowly, God was bending Jacob more and more into a straight man. Once again, God often does not explain many things. If he did, faith would not develop, and many other virtues. This was very true in the life of Job. So let's consider this for a moment. Job is the oldest book in the Bible, written 400 or 500 years before Genesis, about 2000 BC. Only a few hundred years after the flood. The book of Job has a very important message for everyone. So the message of Job capsules the message actually of the whole Bible, parts of it. Why did God create this temporary earth and mankind? Why? It was to develop a tested people. We're told in Isaiah 14, verse 12 to 14, and in Ezekiel 28, verse 13 to 16, here we have a record of Satan's fall in heaven before the earth was created. And there was a terrible rebellion led by him before the earth was created. Revelation 12 verse 4 informs us that Satan drew 1/3 of the angels of heaven to his side. But Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 6:3 that eventually we are called to judge angels, replace them. We are literally called to replace the fallen inhabitants of heaven. Thus, during this short life, we must pass the test that Satan and his followers failed. A dozen times, Scripture tells us that heaven and earth are going to pass away. This earth is temporary. In Revelation 21 verse 1, John sees a new heaven and a new earth, for this present heaven and earth had passed away. But then in Revelation 21 verse 9, the only thing that remains from this earth going into the next life, John is told, "Come up here, John, and I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife." The only thing that remains from this earth is a people who've responded to God's love. Only a tested people remain. And this is the reason this temporary earth was created, to develop a tested people who love God from their own free will. You can never force anyone to love you. It must come from the heart, from someone's free will. What is the first thing we learn about our first parents, Adam and Eve, in the garden? They were tested. By who? By the very one we're called to replace. So God's silence. Coming back to our theme, during our trials, God is often quiet. And this is where we are really being tested. Do we trust God? Do we believe He's faithful and true? He would only do what's best for us, yes. Will He make everything beautiful in His time? Yes. Is the Lord worthy to be trusted? Oh, yes. But this is the whole purpose of tests. Often when we're in a trial, God is silent. This is our greatest test of all, when God is quiet and doesn't say anything to us or explain. So in Job's trial, God was silent for month after month. Maybe his trial went on for a year and a half. We don't know exactly. Job was a very good man. He represents a good man in a trial and to be made even a better man. That's the purpose of trials. Suddenly, in one day, he lost everything, bankrupt. All his children died. His wife was hysterical. All his friends misunderstood him and judged him. And God remained silent for months. What a test. God did not explain to Job what was going on. He did not explain the purpose of the test. Job was not ready or conditioned to hear what God had to say. You know, during this trial of Job, certain problems came to the surface in Job's heart. And the trial caused Job to say a number of unspiritual things. And God had to wait for these things to rise to the surface. Job needed to be convinced of the things he was unaware of in his own heart. So God waited in silence for months. And I would have to say that when God is silent, it's a major part of our trial or test. And this is where our real character is revealed, when God is silent. We need to hold steady, friends. But God speaks at the perfectly right time. God knows when it's best to speak to us, when it's going to help us. God knew when to speak to Job, but God waited for months. People who know God best have known great silence at times. Moses is another example who spent many years in the wilderness. God did not explain everything to him, nor does he explain everything to us. Delays are from God. We are tested greatly during delays. Israel failed terribly in the wilderness when there was delays. But this is when we are being tested most, when God is silent. You know, there's such a blessing that awaits those who wait patiently for God. Isaiah 64 verse 4 says this: "Since the beginning of the world men have not heard, nor perceived by the ear, neither hath the eye seen beside thee what he hath prepared for him who waits for him." So friends, when we're in a difficult time and God is silent, let's wait patiently with faith. He will make everything beautiful in his time. But Israel missed their blessings and promises because they failed their tests in the wilderness. And many of these tests were from delays, and when God was silent. I want to end this with the testimony of a great man, John Wright Follett. He wrote several very nice books. He was the author of Broken Bread and Arrows of Truth. Well, he had a vision one day of a lattice. He was walking on one side of the lattice and the Lord was walking on the other side. He couldn't see the Lord sometimes, and sometimes he could, but he knew the Lord was there. And at times, things that were growing on the lattice thinned out, and he could faintly see through the lattice. He could see the Lord. This is a vision. Then the Lord was totally out of sight again. Finally, there came an opening, and he saw the Lord clearly. Well, God created the seasons, day and night, light and darkness, summer and winter. and times of blessing and times of difficulty. There are times when God speaks much, and other times when he is very quiet. So in the times when God is silent, let's hold steady. Let's keep faith in our hearts. Let's maintain a good confession. Let's believe God to bring us through the dark time because there is a new day coming and it will be wonderful. So let's not be discouraged or depressed. The Lord of hosts is with us when he is speaking and when he is silent. Amen.